Welcome back to the Cycle Report. It's winter and I live around Chicago, and that means the weather is, well, it's terrible. My friends and I have figured out the solution to the winter blues, and it resides 750 miles south of where I live, in Birmingham, Alabama. It's the Barber Motorsports Park, home of the Barber Vintage Motorcycle Museum and the world-renowned Barber Motorsports Racetrack. We get our cars prepped, we get our track tires packed up, jacks, tools, helmet, and we hit the road. First, a little history lesson. George Barber was a race car driver in the 1960s. He mostly raced Porsches and other sports car marques, and he had a very successful career. Once he retired, he transitioned to collecting motorcycles. The idea was to have a large museum and also have a test track on the facility. It took a few years, but in 2003, the Barber Motorsports Park officially opened to the public. The goal was always to build the largest and biggest motorcycle collection in the world. And once you walk into the museum, you don't doubt this for a minute. There are over 1,600 motorcycles in the Barber collection, and in the museum itself, as many as 960 are on display at any one time. George Barber said himself that if you look at a car on display, it's paint and hubcaps. That's oversimplifying things a lot. But his point is, with a motorcycle, you can look at everything. It's not just a body color and wheels. You can see the frame, you can see cables, you can see hoses, exposed linkages, all the mechanical bits that make this machine come alive in motion are out there for display. And what's really neat about the Barber Museum is you can walk through and see the old stuff, the medium stuff, and the new stuff, and just watch the motorcycle evolve. There's an entire corner of really early experimental prototypes, steam-powered bikes, motorcycles that have like a leather belt drive instead of what later became chains or traditional belts or shaft drives. And as you walk through the museum, you get to see the progression and the evolution of the motorcycle. There are 200 different manufacturers that are represented under this roof. 200. You'll see anything that was ever made. I mean, single-cylinder engines. There was a V12 motorcycle and almost everything in between. It's almost overwhelming. It's like sensory overload. There's stuff hanging from the ceilings, coming off the walls, and everywhere you look, it's just something completely remarkable that is stare-worthy or drool-worthy. And then you turn around and you see something else you didn't notice the first time you walked through, and you want to go read the plaque on it and hear the history about this machine. And unlike some museums that have everything behind a velvet rope and to keep it at arm's distance, you really can get up and close and personal with these things in a way that most places won't let you do. There's certain areas that have installations that are themed. There's an off-road area that they have this amazing setup where they've made sort of a fake dirt track, and they have probably 35 motorcycles jumping over a gap in a motocross track. Wooden board racing they did like in 1910, when the motorcycles looked more like bicycles with engines strapped onto them. They have a section of one of those racetracks in the museum. They're sidecar racers, but there's also this crazy sidecar thing with a wicker basket seat that looks like a death trap with a gentleman's suit on. There's a really great installation of Buell motorcycles, sort of showing their entire progression from early prototypes all the way to the last bikes they ever made. And you can really see the ideas permeate and evolve just from one brand in one installation. There's a corner of nothing but racing Yamaha two-strokes from the 60s. It's unbelievable. There's some areas that don't have any rhyme or reason. In one corner, there is a modern Ducati Monster and a KTM RC8 sitting next to a Honda Blackbird from the late 90s. Then next to a gorgeous MV Agusta F4. Next to a Christmas tree-looking carousel of vintage scooters. And somehow this weird, eclectic chaos just makes sense. So you go floor by floor, and then all of a sudden you come up to Lotus Corner. They have race cars from almost every era that Lotus competed in. It's just awesome. It's way more than you'd expect, but it's perfect. There's a Porsche driving experience center here at Barber Motorsports Park as well. There's a huge fleet of gorgeous cars, and they obviously go on the racetrack. They have a skid pad, they have a handling circuit, sort of what looks kind of like it could be configured for an autocross track, and they have an off-road area. The off-road area actually goes in the middle of the racetrack. There's a forest in the middle of the infield. There's a waterfall, there's a variable height water crossing, and they can control the waterfall and the river height. There's trees, there's undulations, and this entire course is inside the racetrack. I mean, we came all the way there. We might as well take a lap around the track and show you what it's like. The track itself is very special. It follows the natural curves of the terrain. So where there was a hill, there is still a hill. There's just now a beautifully manicured track on top of it. And of all the racetracks I've ever been on, this one feels the most natural. And by that I mean it's really quick to learn. A lot of times you're trying to memorize corners and you think there's gonna be a left and a right, then a left and a right. And it takes you a lot of laps to really get that dialed in where you're not thinking about it anymore. What's remarkable about Barber is after like 2 laps, you kind of learn it. Now, I'm not saying you've mastered it, but at least you're not thinking about, oh, is there a left coming up next? Because by following the natural contours of the hills, the track has a natural flow to it. If you're kind of going this way and taking a right, in your head, it feels like a curvy road, if it was a country road, would start going left. And usually that's the way the track goes at Barber. It just feels so natural and so intuitive. What doesn't feel intuitive, especially from someone from the Midwest, where we have flat and more flat, is all the hills. This thing has dives more like a wooden roller coaster than a traditional racetrack. There is hardly any flat area on the entire track. You're either going uphill or downhill almost the entire time. With the exception of the main straightaway, there's hardly any flat spots in the entire track. Turn 1 is a left hand that drops probably 40 feet at a 100-mile-an-hour entry, and then back up that high, if not higher again, 3 seconds later to go around turn 2. And the whole thing goes like that. It's just up and down and up and down. There's about a half-size corkscrew, kind of like Laguna Seca, that goes through turn 7 and 8 and swoops underneath the bridge right in front of the museum. And it's a great viewing point. And with my huge family of track rat friends, it's all of our favorite racetracks any of us have ever been on. So all of this to say is if you're bored in the winter, you owe it to yourself to come to this wonderful facility, take on the racetrack, check out the museum, spend some time here, and just soak in the love letter to motorsports that this entire beautiful compound is. And then it's pack up the car and drive all the way back home, 750 more miles back to Chicago, where it's snowy, it's cold, and the motorcycles need work. Thanks again for watching the Cycle Report. I'll see you next time.
You're watching Everyday Driver. We make a TV show, podcast,
and YouTube channels dedicated to great cars, driving adventures, and helping you find a car you'll love.
subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss a thing.